morning. We start our WebEx meeting with Al-Fatiha. Today's lecture is about scenario, one of the forecasting technique, and you should use scenario in your phase 2 group project. The final part of your phase 2 group project, you have to use scenario. You have to construct a scenario for your product technology. And today, I will share some information about scenario construction or scenario building. Okay, we start with the PowerPoint notes. I'm going to share with you. Lecture note number 7. In your group project for the product technology, as a conclusion or at the end of your phase 2 group project, you have to construct scenario for your product technology, which include not only the forecast or the what you foresee for the change in technological change, but also include other aspects of change as well. So you may include society or societal and economic factors as well in your scenario. So to better understand of this scenario construction process, I share with you today the scenario techniques. Okay. This is the outline of lecture for today's, and also inshallah, if we will not finish, we continue on Wednesday. Introduction, types of scenario, how are scenario used, checklist for scenario construction, and some advice for scenario building or construction. Okay, what is meant by scenario? It can simply be defined as outline or synopsis of some aspect of the future, or future histories or snapshot, meaning that it's like a picture or a snapshot of future at one time, or future histories, meaning that it's a timeline of a future history. Though normally we talk about history, the past one, but in scenario, we depict the picture, we illustrate the picture, the future history on the timeline of the future, not the past history, or maybe one snapshot at one time in the future. An example of scenario, yeah, in such as in real estate or housing advertisement. At one time previously, yeah, you can see even till now, normally the housing developer or in property, they always publish a pamphlet showing not only their housing estate, but also the living style or the lifestyle of that living area, such as, for example, when they want to construct a condominium or they want to build a sign park or something, or housing development area, yeah, such as around UTM, there are several housing area. Uh, so at the beginning, they will have come up with advertisement or pamphlets, yeah, uh, illustrating not only that house or the house in that particular housing estate, but also living style or lifestyle of that um, in that area, such as, for example, in many uh, condominium building or construction, they will include in that drawing or illustration, uh, uh, such as uh, a swimming pool and some family having kids also at the playground, and they also show off a luxury car, for example, luxury living lifestyle, and so on. Yeah. That's an example of a snapshot of the future, though it might be true or not true. Yeah. Or in other case, they also may come up with model building. Yeah, I went to uh, the uh, developers of the office of developers of Pulai Jaya, yeah, under land. They come up with a huge area of housing estate, which will include they portray in that housing estate there are uh, uh, primary school, secondary school as the infrastructure in that, and also mosque as well. Yeah, a big mosque. They show everything. Big mosque um, and sports center as well. However, in reality, uh, that housing development only progress to phase one and not continue till now, phase two, phase three, phase four. Suppose it's this housing estate should be a very big housing estate uh, and still connected to Snai highway. Yeah? So it can enter the plus highway in Snai. But unfortunately, maybe due to low demand, they just stop. And very frustrated for those who yeah, inhabited in that housing estate, because they expect, based on the model or those illustration in the advertisement, the early advertisement, it showed that it will have mosque, for example, a school as well, and other infrastructure. And this infrastructure they plan to build in the maybe third phase or fourth phase of the project, but the project has been stopped or abandoned, not continuing. Yeah, but it has been portrayed or illustrated in scenario. Okay, so that's example of scenario. Many other example as well, such as many, as I told you, in construction, such as in future city. Yeah, you can Google on map. They have imagination of future city. As I told you about the construction of an island city uh, in South Korea. Yeah, they already construct the island now, and they plan in 20 years time to have another phases or a few more phases of the project of the construction, the modern city of uh, island in South Korea. Uh, so they use imagination in constructing the snapshot of the future or future history. Yeah. Future history mean timeline in the future. What's going to happen next, phases by phases. Okay. Um, Scenario encompass the plausible range of possibilities for some aspect of the future. So it include as much of what is going to happen in future. Yeah. Maybe presented in narrative form or descriptive. Yeah, some people describe, so it can be more describing or explaining uh, what is forecasted for the future. For example, like yeah, what is going to happen uh, for the uh, or uh, problem going to face by uh, uh, potential buyers in the future. Yeah. For example, now we have phone, so we expect what's mobile phone in near future. Yeah. Uh, Such as yeah, I just came back from clinics, so of course at clinic UTM clinic they still have a system like uh, doctor uh, have to to log in into the PC at the clinic, and also she same time use her mobile phone. But maybe in near future, the doctor can be at anywhere, and she can trace back the record by connecting or integrating to the clinic or hospital system. I just imagine, yeah. So this is a type of illustration of or imagination of uh, what's going to happen in the future. So because I was suppose I met the doctor uh, before 10 o'clock, but she was somewhere, yeah, at the hemodialysis clinic. She was so it takes time for the patient to waiting, and maybe I do not know. I guess in near future, um, by having a system that integrated system, so a doctor can have communication or system by using a phone, yeah, and also connect to the reports or the progress reports of what's happening to the patient and so on, and also give the instructions. Yeah. So it's a compass of the possible range of possibilities for some aspect of the future. Okay. It can be narrative, meaning description, in essay form and often include numerical data and graphics. That's another advantage of scenario. You can integrate uh, mathematical model, expert opinion, and or Delphi techniques into this scenario. Yeah. So you can include um, um, a numerical data such as trend analysis, but maybe not much, but it can help. So you include the mathematical or numerical data and also graphics, by graphics. Graphics such as I give you example just now, um, pamphlet for housing estate for condominium when they want to make promotion or sales. If you go to housing, or sometimes they put in your um, post box or mailbox, the pamphlets, so you can see that's an imagination of the future. And sometimes the construction project not yet started, but they already have a picture or graphics of the future. Yeah, and many cases it's not realized or not complete some of the construction project, and many construction project especially for the hypermarket shopping mall, for example, in Johor Bahru, has been or have been stranded, not completed, even after some years. Whereas, uh, yeah, as example, uh, for example, Paradigm, which was previously built for the purpose of administration building. And yeah, I saw the pamphlet or the advertisement, and then has been renovated several times, and then they also have the advertisement sale of the units for the shopping complex Paradigm, yeah, on the way to JB, nearby Ampoi. There's a big shopping complex Paradigm. Okay, even multimedia presentations of still and motion pictures, audio, and so forth. Uh, Such as in interior design. You can also see example of motion pictures or still pictures and audio, uh, meaning that some of them um, software, special software for presenting interior design. Now has been used by many interior design artists or company. So you can give your idea, or you can, for example, you want to renovate your in-house, or you want to have a new interior design. So you give the spec of your house, and then they will come up with several choice or alternative of interior design. Yeah? Having uh, graphics, still, and moving or motion pictures, and also may include some audio as well. Assumption used in scenario building: the full richness of future can be reasonably incorporated in a set of imaginative direction that can incorporate many aspects many data set in a set of imaginative description or narrative or in graphic motion pictures or still pictures as well. Usable forecast can be constructed from a very narrow database. This is one of the advantage of scenario because sometimes, especially in the situation when we have lack of data, numerical data, we have not much um, from the previous data, only maybe just some basic data, so we can incorporate this as a base to start our construction of scenario or our imagination. However, we have to be careful, yeah? Because that's also represent the disadvantage of or the weakness of uh, these techniques or scenario construction techniques, because sometimes it's too much of imagination, imaginary. So maybe we can include our creativity in the process of construction of the scenario.
Sir, we cannot hear what you say.
That's highly uncertain situation, and to non-technical audience, especially when you want to explain, you want to present the forecast or the forecasting data to non-technical audience or normal or ordinary audience or potential users or buyers, which you think that it's not easily for them to comprehend or to understand the technical or numerical model, such as in trend analysis, such as in trend extrapolation, such as, for example, you have exponential smoothing, uh, and it's not easy to explain uh, ordinary or regular or uh, potential buyers, which have sometimes many of them do not have a good background of mathematics. So it's much easier to use scenario to communicate or to present uh, what's going to happen in your future. As I gave you example of uh, the construction or the housing estates, condominium, and so on. They use uh, illustration or graphic to show the living style of the future. Of course, to some extent, they also include some exaggerations of the living style, having a sport car, having uh, yeah, happy families in at the swimming pool or at the playgrounds and so on. And sometimes not realizable. Even after years of construction of the condominium, they not even have the playground, yeah, for the children. And yeah, it's a true facts, such as at one time, uh, there's one condominium nearby Sri Putri, which was portrayed as an exclusive condominium. Yeah, and if you, yeah, just nearby Sri Putri. Unfortunately, after some years, no, maybe not so many buyers or takers of that uh, condominium. So they rent to foreign worker. You know what's happened when you have foreign worker, or mostly foreign worker renting of that condominium or the apartments inside that condominium. So local people move up, or some of them sell out, or some of them they rent to those foreigner or foreign worker. After some time, yeah, maybe the contractor of that apartments for foreign worker, they stop their business, or they stop their uh, production and so on. They stop hiring the or renting the apartments, and it's left over. So what's happened to that condominium? And not only at Sri Puchi, many other condominiums around JB. It's become a haunted condominium. Nobody there. It's left over and in bad looking as well. Uh, though previously was portrayed as exclusive living style uh, area or something like that. Okay? Use of technique to integrate quantitative and qualitative information when both are critical, um, especially in the situation when we want to have both qualitative and quantitative for in our forecast result. So scenario is the best technique. that can integrate quantitative and qualitative information, both in one result. We can also portray the graphic to integrate forecast from various sources. That's another use of scenario. We can integrate trend analysis technique. We can integrate data from mathematical model, trend extrapolation, and also we can integrate Delphi. We can have data from survey, a few rounds of survey we conduct through Delphi techniques, maybe just one round from expert opinion interview. We can include in this analysis, scenario and analysis, and also we can have scenario results to present to audience. So various sources and techniques into a coherent picture of the future. Yeah? We can combine and then come up with a graphic and also illustration or narrative description of future. To provide a forecast when data are too weak or no data at all. We don't have data, mathematical, such as the startup business. We just the new incumbent into the market. We want to start to introduce our product technology. So we don't have any data, or we just have weak data based on our customer data or our expected competitors, or what's the main players in the market now. So we use their data, compute our data. So it's maybe not as accurate. Yeah. So we call it weak data or too weak data or no data. Credible experts are lacking. And when we want to ask to secure, to acquire expert opinion, but it seems like we don't have credible expert or gaining the information regarding our product technology. So in that case, scenario is useful to use for future forecasting. And also in the situation that assumption required to develop good models are not available. And we are in the situation even to create or to have a base of assumption, meaning that a good base of assumptions also is difficult because sometimes assumption is not credible, or we ourselves not compete with the assumption. So we can use scenario. Whereas in trend extrapolation, normally we test the confidence by using confidence interval. I use F test and T test. Measure T test to measure the confidence intervals. Normally we use 90% of confidence on 95% or 99%, meaning that it's calculated forecast or risk, calculated risk of forecast. But in the situation that the basis or assumption also weak, and we ourselves not really confident. So we can use scenario in our forecasting. Okay, the weakness of this technique or scenario building techniques, more fantasy than forecast. That's the weakness of the, the usual results of the scenario. More fantasy than forecast, or too much imagination or imaginary than facts. Even in the future, we should base on facts, so figure, mathematics. But uh, in this technique, sometimes it produces results that sometimes based on imagination. Unless a firm basis in reality is maintained. So that's also we have to take into consideration when we build or construct our scenario, especially when you want to apply in your uh, phase two project of product technology. At the end, you have to make conclusion and come up with illustration or narration or description of your what's going to happen to your future product, futuristic product, what's going to happen in the market. You have to illustrate. You have to have, based on your creativity, your own creativity or group creativity, you have to come up with illustration, description, or also graphic, maybe motion picture, sketching of the future, like as what has been portrayed in condominium advertisement, as I did mention to you. Next, types of scenarios. There are a few classification. They classify and a few types of scenarios. Okay. Uh, the first classification based on their temporal orientation. Uh, Based on the time used for the forecasting. The temporal orientation meaning that the time used on the this is the one way of uh, classifying the scenario types. There are two types uh, of scenario which is classified according to the time orientation. The first one is future histories, and the second one snapshot, or the third one combination of both future histories and snapshot scenarios. Future histories map a trajectory from the present state to some future time, focusing on a particular part of the world and tracking its development during the some period. More or less like future timelines, starting from, for example, from now, from today, and then next week, next month, or next year, maybe 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years, 5 years later. So we have that timeline or map or milestones. What's going to happen or some aspect from now till 5 years time. That's we call future history. Consists of milestone. Milestone meaning that's like we have on the highway. Yeah, uh, uh, plus highway from south to the north. Yeah, they always have uh, uh, signboard, or we call it, that's milestone. Previously, that's known as milestone. Stone that's indicates or state uh, where we are now at that time. If you are traveling using highway, for example, at kilometer 23.5, and then next kilometer 30.5, and so on. So that milestones that indicates uh, some aspect of at particular time along the way. We call it trajectory. Trajectory is the path of the future path, or if we follow a certain system or certain path, so we will see all these uh, milestones or some aspect of indicators or measure. So, for example, like when they want to tell us accidents happen in kilometer what and what, based on the milestone or that uh, signboard mentioning where is it. That's we call it future histories. Future histories stress the dynamics of a system. Normally, it will include many aspects. That's we call it the dynamics of the system. Many aspects. Some of these aspects um, can be changed. That's we call it dynamics. Not static. It can change over time. That's the dynamic along the trajectory. For example, future history can also include uh, societal and political aspect. Like now, we are facing COVID-19, and they are introducing uh, the antivirus for COVID-19. So it may change, and also some action taken along the way. For example, PKPD for certain area, or PKPB. So it will have some cause and effect due to the action taken, or there may be reaction change. That's we call it dynamic. And also the change of political party. We know that uh, you know, at the beginning, before uh, we are facing we were facing the COVID-19, other government administer the country, and then just a sudden it changed, and lots of change due to the change of the administration government of Malaysia. And we do not know, because the other party as well, they want to change back the political situation in Malaysia. So the stability, this is what we call the dynamic. It's not only effect the change in business, but as well in many aspects, not in politics, in government, but also in business as well. Due to we call it political instability, investor, foreign investor, may be not confident enough to stay, or some it's have some cause and effect. This is the dynamic of a system. Possibly at the expense of its structural or cross-sectional characteristic. Structural meaning that the base of the system, or some cross-sectional, maybe other factors or variable as well can just come in. We can expect the beginning, but maybe, as we call it, under cross-sectional characteristic. Just a sudden something turn in at along the timelines or along the milestone, something may happens. That's the dynamic of the future histories in scenario forecasting technique. Okay, the second types is snapshot of the future. So it's a bit different from the future history. Snapshot is more or less like we take the picture. We have a snapshot of future, but this picture represent at one time of the future. It's not a current picture. For example, you can snapshot my face now, but snapshot of scenarios is the snapshot of the future at one time in future, or futuristic picture based on imagination at one time. Or it also can set as a goal, as I gave example to you in the housing advertisement or condominium advertisement. It's a snapshot of the future living style. So they portray that in that condominium, they have a swimming pool, they have children playground, they have in-house sports center where the inhabitants of that condominium can have all this indoor exercise, like gymnasium. Sometimes they include in the housing estate development or in condominium. That also present snapshot at one time in the future, because the development project of that condominium of housing not yet start, but the imagination of the architects or the imagination of the designer, they include. Also, in the interior design, they may include end results of change or amendment made to the interior of house or office by portraying motion picture. If you walk into the house or to the office, this is the situation or the picture or the imagination of what's the end result of the purpose or the goal of the renovation project. After making the change or the renovation, this is the end result expected to be. The renovation project not yet started. And normally, when you start the renovation project, you can see normally the customer, even I myself, when I do renovation at the back of my house or the front of my house, a lot have changed. We have to change because it's not fulfill the what we are expected at the beginning in reality or in when it's yeah, of course in picture or in it's not as the real construction. That's another types of scenario. We call it snapshots of the future. Present a cross-sectional view at one time. It's like we call it we cut at that time. Yes, we call it a cross-sectional view at a single point in time and structural rather than dynamic compared to future histories. Many change can happen or can be included. Another example of future histories like we use in simulation. We will come to that techniques in simulation. We use, for example, in business simulation, we use for a business change. For example, we include change in price of oil. It's directly affect the in Malaysia has fluctuate. Maybe this week we have this price, and then next week it changed to other price, and it also affect the business market. And some players may increase. Like for example, we have seasonal factors. Now, the price of chicken increase, the price of other commodities increase due to fasting Ramadan months, and next going to so the players or the seller, they change the, and then government set up the ceiling price. That's we call it in BSIM or in simulation future histories. What's going to happen? We include all these factors or variables. However, in snapshot, we just take across sectional at one time or single point in time. Characteristic and emphasize. So it's highlight more on the cross-sectional view at particular time. Snapshot portray goals or end state. Future histories portray plans or path to end state. So that's the difference between snapshot and future histories. As I told you, future histories is more or less like milestone or timeline. Also in manufacturing, you have Gantt chart. Gantt chart represent monthly or weekly production schedule. What is going to happen? Yeah, suppose this week we going to start model XYZ, and maybe after 2 weeks XYZ will finish, so we will start and model ABC. So that present the plan or path of the production in assembly or in logistic for 1 month or for 6 months. That's in production we use Gantt chart, another example. Snapshot portray goals or end state results. What we are supposed to achieve at the end of the schedule or at the end of the result. Yeah. The target, for example, we want to increase sales. So we want to increase the productions target. So we have the annually production schedule, or we call it MPS, Master Plan Schedule, which portray each month. For example, we want to have 10,000 unit by end of the year. So each month maybe 1,000 unit. Maybe, yeah, because sometimes it's due to reject and slow in production. Sometimes we do not achieve weekly or monthly target. So a snapshot like NPS, we call it end state or goals of the past. Okay, another classification also can be made based on descriptive or normative. That's another classification of scenario. And based on this classification, there are two types of scenario, whether it's descriptive or normative. Descriptive based on extrapolating, or we use some mathematical data like in trend analysis, we use models, mathematical models to extrapolate, or we use simulation. Based on simulation, we extrapolate, meaning that we extend the data into the future. And normal on opinions or belief at one time, or intuitive, we call it intuitive, that's normative, or subjective judgment. Maybe the constructor of, or the builder of the scenario, he or she believes something like this. So based on, or he also include based on the response from the customer, feedback from the market. So based on the information, that's we call normative or subjective judgment. So based on subjective judgment, they portray or forecast the future. Descriptive scenario address the issue of what will come to pass based on past data, they extrapolate. Descriptive scenario simply lay out the range of possible futures determined in the forecast without attempting to evaluate them as desirable or undesirable. That's that descriptive. We explain what's going to happen in the future without have the intention of measuring or putting the indicator of desirable or undesirable, or favorable or unfavorable. We just have description of the future. Whereas normative scenario describe what should come to pass. These scenarios respond to planning and policy making concerning by representing goals and plan. So normative scenario is also taking into consideration action plan. we have a plan, and then, for example, we have strategies and then action plan to achieve that strategy, where we are going to achieve the goals, and we have we call it feed forward measurement. Feed forward measurement like guidelines, policy, SOP, standard operating procedure, to control actually the implementation of the action plan or the policy or the planning. That's feed forward. Feedback control, meaning that after the uh, implementation, for example, we have immediate reaction, such as in auto assembly, auto insertion. We are in production or assembly process. We have auto insertion machine, and then we have computer or robot, computer normally, which control the interval, the, uh, the we call it the upper and lower limits of acceptance. And let's say if any just a sudden is above the or outside the limits of acceptance level, maybe above the upper or below the lower limits, the control or the computer will highlight, giving the alarms that is over the limits, over the acceptance level. That we call it feed forward after the implementation or on the process. Call it on the time. On the time. On feed forward after the completion of the process or the implementation, we have the feedback of the report and so on. That's normative scenario. So all these measurement or indicators feed forward, as I did mention to you just now, such as SOP. Before starting the process, you have to, for example, everybody has to in-house cleaning. Have to make sure that your machine is clean, your cutter, your station is ready, and so on. So then that's SOP, standard operating procedure, and next process, next stage, and so on. Like now we are facing COVID-19. Before entering the clinic, for example, we have to scan using that's government hospitals scanner to scan, and then we have to also to scan the temperature, also to liquid, wash our hand with liquid and so on, cover our face with the cover. That SOP. And so normative scenario describe what should come to pass in the future. So this scenario respond to planning and policy making concerned by representing goals and plans, action plans, SOP, and so on. Scenarios very often are constructed in set. When you build or construct scenario, normally you construct a few set of scenario, not just one snapshot. Normally it's have a few set of illustration or a few set of description what going to happen in the future. When a single dimension is dominant, example, one aspect or one variable is dominant, the most common grouping is a set of three. When we study, for example, one dimension or one construct, one variable that we think this is the most important. X1 is the most important factors or the most important variable in our study. Y equal to X1, meaning that Y is the dependent variable and X1 is the independent variable, which is the most dominant. Of course, we have a few other dimension to study as well. Maybe some economics, some society, and also some political aspect or dimension as well to include. But we think one of the most dominant in our product technology project is the material technology. Let's say material technology. So we have to normally in this kind of a scenario, they will have three set of scenario construction or building. Baseline, optimistic, and pessimistic scenario. Forecast the change in material technology, for example, for our product technology, we want to change one of the sub-technology of the material. So we will have a baseline scenario, and optimistic scenario and pessimistic scenario. We learn in probabilistic or stochastic techniques. Baseline meaning that we assume that it's normal situation. Most of the thing is okay or nothing much going to change. In optimistic, the most likely what's going to happen. For example, if we change this sub-technology of this material, most likely to happen in technical attributes. And also what is most likely to happen in market sales. When we change these technical attributes, the performance of, for example, in camera, when the camera has been improved, what's going to happen in the sales of the product technology. So it will affect the diffusion dynamics of the sale. That optimistic. And another worst condition is pessimistic. It's more or less like nothing to change. Though we have changed the technology. I have a few students, for example, in entrepreneurship subject. They want to change container or bottle for the water. Yeah, like many Chinese students, they like to bring along the bottle or water to drink. And yeah, a few groups come up with container, food container that can be heat using. They have some kind of technology, and also this drinking water have multi-purpose usage application. Yeah, to some extent, it have maybe is have yeah, of course. I accept that we call it innovative idea or creative idea, innovative product, but it seems like it's low end, or we can expect a worst case situation. Though you include some change in technological, or we call it technological change or innovativeness, and it costs. And when we want to include big change in technology, so it will incur some cost or more cost. However, the result, we can expect that it will have low end or low return, meaning that uh, uh, a low markup profitability margin, a low profitability margin. Yeah, for example, like how much you want to sell uh, those new or innovative drinking water bottles, or a multi-purpose bottle compared to the old one, or the food container. Maybe just a few cents. Meaning that the profitability margin or markup of the profits only a few percent, very low margin. So its returns or economic returns, maybe many customer or users may buy the old one, and nobody bother of the new tech include in that bottle or. I give that comment to those, and of course this those I accept that assignment for entrepreneurship and giving mark, but not to submit to SAM competition, because in SAM competition they also measure the returns, the economic, the potential of returns to generate wealth, meaning that you come up with something that also generate wealth in the future. Okay, so uh, you can set your you can construct your scenario in your product technology at the end of the group project. You can use baseline, optimistic, and the worst situation, or pessimistic, or worst prediction. How are scenario used? I did mention just in the previous uh, transparency of slide about users of the scenario, and this is more also relate to that users of the scenario. Scenarios can provide intellectual simulation for imaginative or imagination possibilities that the future may hold. Having future scenario, so it can create, uh, it can motivate, or it can be the drivers of intellectual stimulation for the future thinking. like start this for long time ago in Japan, before Japan became one of the top. Yeah. Previously, Japan is at one time in 1990s, Japan, like Sony company and many other Japanese uh, company I did mention last time. Uh, Became uh, in the market share or the top of the market during 1990s, and now Korean, yeah, South Korea become the first in the market in terms of innovativeness. And one one way has been a successful story of Japan in innovation or in promoting innovativeness or creativity of their people. They have from the childhood of their people. They let their people or their child or the children's being creative or innovative. So they include in not only in their education system, but also in ordinary life of daily life of the people, of the children, of the kids. Have imagination or creativity to create something new. Yeah. And in Malaysia, we just started, yeah, such as for example, the subject of entrepreneurship, just lately introduced, yeah, about 10 years, has been introduced in at university levels. And before that, we don't have that creativity or entrepreneurship subject. And now we just started. Yeah. Uh, in Japan, one of the famous movie for the kid is they have Doraemon. Yeah? Doraemon is one of good example of innovativeness or creativity stimulation for the kids. Not even the kids, to the young people as well. Yeah? Uh, for episode of Doraemon, that we can see uh, uh, they always highlight problems, normally technical problems, as we did in quiz retrospective study of the layout, the technical problem of layout the cables under the sea cable, the first transatlantic cable. And in Doraemon series also, technical problem, normally Nobita face problems. Yeah? And then ask Doraemon to solve his problem. And almost every time in the episode or a series of Doraemon, Doraemon come up with a technology to solve Nobita problem. And also they include in the series or the technology, the episodes, time misuse or abuse by the friends of Nobita. Uh, the name of the friends of Nobita. Nobita normally Nobita want to show off to his girlfriends uh, of the use of the technology, of the application of the technology. Oh yeah, yeah. I recall. Sunio, Sunio and Giant, norms or abuse of the technology, and the cause and effect or the impact of misuse and abuse of the technology. Almost every series, yeah? It's not lately, but It was started sometime in 1970s in Japan, daily. So they stimulate their people, their children, and also has been split into Chinese and also in magazine. Yeah? In early 80s, we can see what we call it, like comics, comics, not magazine, comics books for children produced in Chinese in Malaysia. And we can see a few shops, 1980s, where Chinese children can go or read at the shop. This Nobita, Doraemon comics in 1980s. And for Malay, just lately started late 1990s, 1990s, 90, late 1990s or early 2000 has been translated into Malay and published in comic version. And many kids influenced by these comics. One of them is my child, my eldest child. He was not interested at all in reading. But then we start introduce him. And he put effort to understand. Maybe first by uh, glance through the picture because this comic include pictures of Doraemon, Nobita, and he tried to understand by glance through or look at the picture. And I did that. He can read or not. Of course, at the beginning, he can't read, but he put effort, try to understand. So we start introducing the alphabet, the vowel, how to pronounce, and have the interest till finish one book, and then ask us to buy um, more sets of Doraemon series. Example, even like yeah, during my childhood, we have those what we call it another cartoon of in Japan, Ultraman, and now we can see that Ultraman helmet has been realized. Yeah? During my childhood, we have ordinary uh, the for the motorcycle. It's not as we have a helmet now. Yeah. So the appearance of the helmet has changed more or less like helmet used by those those people in the net fighters in Syria. Yeah, they have that helmet in the Ultraman series, or they have another cartoon, not Ultraman. It's like Riders or whatever cartoon. I do not remember. I recall the title of that. It's like the fighters or rider normally have a yellow color, pink color for the ladies, and gray or red color of the fighters uh, wear costume and helmet. and now they have that helmet for the racing car, for the motorcyclists, and so. Scenario can also stimulate intellectual and also creativity of the future. Yeah, by looking at the scenario, people can imagine, such as they have futuristic city, futuristic living lifestyle, and so on. Though maybe to some extent it's just imagination. As I told you, one of the overestimation in space exploration technology development. They at one time during 1970s they portray that in future after year 2000s or new millennium people will stay in space station, many space station in the outer space, or people will travel in the outer space using space aircraft or space stations. That's the thinking at that time of the future. To some extent, it's overestimation, though many companies have invest billions in this project to realize those space travelers explorations. Scenarios can be used to assess whether various policies or action will assist or inhibit the realization of condition described in them. So scenarios can also use as a measurement or indicators for assessment of the policies or action plans of strategies that will assist inhibit the realization of condition described in the strategies. Normally we have uh, action plan at one stage and after one another, so we can use scenario, timeline scenario or milestone, whether the gaps or the achievement, the actual compared to the plan, the action plan or the plan, the strategies, we can measure the gap. Scenarios can be used to assess how well alternate policies and strategies would perform under different conditions. Involve creating snapshot of future policy, future histories leading to them. We can also uh, uh, use as a measurement or indicator as well. If we want to include uh, alternate policies, if we have, for example, in the project, in the future project, we have at one time we have alternative operation plan. For example, like now, and um, antivirus as another policy, but it seems like slow in taking or people taking the antivirus, and also some cases of negative effect, blood clot and so on. So they make people afraid. Even though those already voluntarily register for the injection, but it seems like when they have sub effect or effect, negative effect of the, so they may have alternative action. Uh, they have, for example, like PKPD for action, SOP, and the effectiveness of alternate policy can be measured using this scenario. Scenarios can provide a common background for planning, as well as the vehicle for creation and presentation. Like in the advertisement of living style of the futuristic condominium, they sometimes include the indoor gymnasium and include a luxury uh, living style, having sometimes they include Ferrari car, BMW car, and many other, just to show the background of the future planning. We call it, and most of the time they will include uh, a scenic or beautiful compound, like they have a palm tree, they have a nice garden, and so on, flower, and so on. By drawing, they include all those the gardening. They have a short compound or to illustrate the background. Whereas in the reality, sometimes it's not really happen. In the leftover or uh, not continue housing development area. A few area in JB, some of them already buy and stay, but the housing area not complete or incomplete housing area left over, and some of the house become the place for the drug addict, and many has been uh, destroyed, and the the background or the situation uh, is not as good as was portrayed before. Yeah? Because uh, yeah, when customer or people buying of the house, they feel, oh, that's because normally it's portrayed the high or exclusive living lifestyle, but after abundance, incomplete constructions left over, and so on, only a few inhabitants, people staying there, and they feel very reluctant to stay, or not so motivated to stay in there, because drug addicts come to the area, and some area uh, become jungle as well, and scary of dangerous animals like snake and so on. Uh, so scenario can provide not only alternate uh, strategy or action plan if something goes wrong. It also can provide background for the planning, just as illustration, or vehicle for creation and presentation. Normally presentation for advertisement, to promote something, to make it more better than depict the true presentation of the real situation. And generic uses, as I did mention, integration, it can integrate many other techniques into this one technique, and integrate trend analysis, extrapolation, expert opinion, Delphi data from survey. A few round of survey, you can include also, you can also include simulation, data from simulation. After a few trial runs, you can include, and also communication. Yeah, another generic use is it can be used to present to non-technical audience. It's not easy to explain exponential data smoothing. to ordinary audience, even to the student who really take the moving average in management science. It's not easy for me to comprehend the student. Those exponential smoothing, cross section in simulation. How this cross section has been computed by mathematical calculation. It's not easy to. I'm still thinking how to make my student. We will come to this cross-sectional analysis, inshallah, after midterm break. But I'm thinking how to make student understand this topic, cross-sectional analysis. So scenario can simplify and can be used to communicate the result to the non-technical audience. We can use descriptive, narrative, normative, graphic, and also illustration or sketching or drawing, moving picture as well, and picture or snapshot of the future. I think we stop now, inshallah. This coming Wednesday, I'm going to talk about the construction of the scenario, steps, or what you have to consider for building or to construct a scenario for your assignment or for your group project. Inshallah, I will notice to you for the WebEx meeting. I do not yet know whether we will have that meeting because I just met the doctor this morning and she referred me to the hospital, HSS, Hospital Sultanah Aminah Hospital, for due to the wound in the my forefinger feet. So I do not know what, after referring to, I have to go this afternoon to the hospital, and inshallah pray for me for the goodness, healthy as well. Yeah. So I have to refer to the hospital, and if let's say the doctor at the hospital put me in the ward, I will notice to you that we don't have lecture on this Saturday, on this Wednesday. Looking at the condition of my the wound at my forefinger, alhamdulillah, it's getting better, and also the fever or the dizziness, I don't feel. But since the doctor have stopped the antibiotic, the doctor at UTM clinic has stopped the antibiotic, so she make further reference to the specialist, because it's not yet cured, fully cured, so I do not know the repercussion. So please kindly pray the inshallah. Stop here. If you have any question regarding your project, you have to continue after. Yes, some of you already submit the progress report, and I'm waiting for your. I'm not yet marking or grading your report. I may need some more time. But if you have any question, you can just post in WhatsApp group or individually. Inshallah, at any time I'm free, I try to entertain, respond to your. Okay, see you, inshallah, hopefully by this Wednesday. Stop here. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Get
You're
well
welcome.
soon.
Thank you, sir. Get well soon.
Thank you, sir.
And